I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you've been lucky enough to tune into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about the environment and ecology. We talk about how they affect you, your friends, your family, and your pets and your neighbors. And I just have to do a quick programming note here. Russell, I am getting massive echo. So it's kind of interesting to hear myself echoing in my headphones, but it's also a little distracting. So if you could fix that, I would appreciate it. All right. So we are, of course, in the midst of COVID, and problems like this one happen when your technician is in another building from you. Thank you, Russell. It's fixed now. And normally we do the show at the studios, and you drive up to the gate, and the guards let you in, and you drive through about a half mile of the forest preserve that surrounds the station building, and as you're making that drive, you just get this feeling that you're on your way to doing something great. And, of course, it's hard to get that when you're sitting in your living room the way I am and the way most of the hosts are now. So I like to dress up, and I'm dressed up in my suit. You can see a picture of it if you watch the YouTube version. No special tie this week, unfortunately. And to me, what that says is just that this COVID crisis has gone on too long. We've all our patience has kind of worn out. It's been months and months now that we've been doing all these special things. And the reason it's gone on too long, of course, is that we tried to force our will on biology. I mean, we tried to act as if there was no pandemic. We tried to pretend back around Father's Day, around April, that we could just open everything back up again. And it doesn't work that way. Biology, if you fight with biology, biology wins, because biology is life itself, and biology is part of ecology, which is a study of life and all the other sciences combined. And you can't, if you try to fight with biology, you're basically battling reality. Now, ecologists know that you can work with biology, you can work with ecology, and you can prosper, and you can get all the resources you need. That's one of our main points that we like to make on For a Green Future, is that the green future is a bountiful future. It's not a future where we're struggling to survive and just fighting over little scraps of food and land and arable and drinkable water. No, a green future is one where we work with biology, and we're kind of learning that lesson as a nation again in a hard way, because the COVID cases had gone up and spiked again because everybody was ignoring social distancing. They weren't wearing their masks. They were believing all this propaganda that's being put out about, masks are going to kill you. So the number of cases peaked back in July, last week in July. They were around 75,000 a day. Now that we're going into the second week in August, they've declined again to about 60,000 a day because people are, again, taking it seriously and putting their masks on and doing what needs to be done to fight this virus. And so that is something good. I mean, that means we can be taught. I mean, maybe we're a little more stubborn. Maybe we need to have the lessons put at us a little harder. Maybe we have to learn things a little more hard way compared to some of the other countries, like the European countries that have COVID under control, and places like New Zealand and Iceland that have eliminated COVID from their countries. But we're getting it again, and we're grudgingly admitting it. And once you work with nature, once you start going with the flow instead of trying to fight and dominate nature, like I say, you get a lot of good stuff. And one thing that we're getting in our garden, our completely organic garden, no pesticides or herbicides, and we just use mulch for fertilizer, mulch that we've created ourselves in our own composting bins. You get the bounty and you get the good stuff. And we have been getting lots of good stuff. This has been a great year for our garden. In fact, we have reached that point in home gardening where we are now growing more tomatoes and zucchini and jalapeno peppers and green beans. We're now growing more than we can eat. And so we have reached that point where now we get to share with the neighbors. Now we get to give our neighbors some zucchini and tomato. I brought a bag over to one of our neighbors who lives across the street just yesterday, and they were very excited about getting the fresh garden produce, and well, they should be, because it's delicious. It's grown organically. You can't get it any fresher. Our garden is putting out produce that is better than the produce you can get at the grocery store right now. So that's the kind of thing we can all have all the time if we pay attention to ecology and work with nature instead of trying to fight nature. And so I'd like to work with you folks on this show and make it a great show. So hopefully everyone will be willing to call in perhaps and participate. This is a call-in show, and the number is 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. Call in at any time during the show, even if there's a guest on, even if we got Rebecca on, because we can take up to 2 callers at once, and so we'd be happy to hear your opinion. And we do have a great guest lined up. Rachel Belz is going to be joining us shortly. In fact, she should be calling in right about now. Russell, if you want to keep your eye on the phone there. She is with Ohio Citizen Action, and she is going to tell us all about what's going on there in Columbus with House Bill 6. Yeah, we thought we were done with House Bill 6 updates when they rammed the thing through, but it's wide open again, and it's right at the top of the news. So Rachel Belz will be joining us. Then Rebecca will join us after we hear from our sponsors, our wonderful, wonderful sponsors at the bottom of the hour. Rebecca Wood will be joining us, my co-host. And then I've got some eco news and views for you. And then the letter from the future from my great-great-granddaughter Marie I. And so we're very happy to be here with you today. This hour of sanity every week, this 1 hour where basically ecology and science and reason rule, this makes my whole week. Being able to do this and talk to you folks about what's going on in the world is really it's really good for my mental health. Let's just say that. And so if you want to help and if you want to join in the healing, give us a call at 866-240-1065 with any sort of environmental news, any sort of environmental topic you want to cover. I got some feedback on last week's show. People said they found the talk about the nuclear waste dump that we have over there in Lucky, Ohio. A lot of people didn't know about that. And, that's the case with a lot of these almost all these environmental issues is that the powers that be kind of like to keep them quiet, kind of like they don't want people looking over there and seeing that we're spending $250 million to clean up a nuclear waste site, which should never have happened in the first place. Because then they'd start to think, wow, we're spending $250 million fixing that up. Maybe nuclear power wasn't that great to begin with if it's got all these hidden costs in there. So we are very happy to have been able to talk about that, and thank you to the listener who gave us some feedback on that story. And hidden costs, hidden activities, the behind the scenes stuff, the stuff that goes on behind the closed doors, that's where most of the really bad decisions are made. When the public has a chance to see what's going on, when democracy gets put into our decision-making process, generally we come out with much better policies. Generally we come out with much better ways of feeding ourselves and getting our energy that we need, and clothing ourselves and distributing the world's resources in a way that doesn't concentrate all the wealth in just a few hands. And democracy is this wonderful, wonderful tool that doesn't get used enough. And last year with House Bill 6, we saw democracy really get subverted. We saw democracy kind of thrown out the window by the Ohio legislature, because they went and took all this testimony and then went and did the exact opposite of what almost all the people making the testimony were telling them was needed. The people who were testifying said we need more wind, we need more solar, and they crafted a bill that cut wind and solar out of Ohio's energy policy and instead went to nuclear and coal, when almost all the guests said we need less coal, we need to stop wasting money on nuclear. And one of the many organizations, because opposition to HB6 was across the board, across the political spectrum, and all sorts of organizations opposed it, not just, quote-unquote, the usual suspects. But one of the groups that was most strongly opposed to HB6, and I think now history has proven that they were very correct in that opposition, was Ohio Citizen Action. And my guest today, Rachel Belz, is with Ohio Citizen Action. Hello, Rachel. Are you on the line?
Hi, Joe. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, thanks.
Great.
Good
to be here.
Could you just... yeah. Well, good. Could you just give us your name and your title and a little bit about what Citizen Action does?
Sure. So I'm Rachel Belz. I am the Executive Director of Ohio Citizen Action, and we are the premier mobilizing and organizing team in the Midwest. So we work on all kinds of issues, but right here in Ohio. Generally, they are of an environmental, consumer, environmental justice kind of a arena, if you will, which is pretty broad. But we're 45 years old, and we work on all kinds of issues, not just legislatively, but certainly we spent a lot of time doing that last year.
Right. And when you say work on, you mean what do you mean exactly? How does Citizen Action work on these issues?
Well, because we do grassroots organizing, and we have 32,000 members in Ohio, we are able to reach out both to our members and then also in a non-pandemic time, I should say, knock on doors in neighborhoods all across the state and make phone calls, have digital reach to people to help them take action as well. We do all of the above with these things because there's so many different ways that our decision makers need to hear from us as their constituents. And, in short attention span time frames like we're in now, it just seems as though you really have to kind of help people put their attention on something, especially as big as HB6, while it's happening. The other thing is they were hearing a lot about it. So when we do our organizing and our work, oftentimes we're either informing people of something that they're sort of letting us know they're hearing for the first time, or they know a tiny bit about it and they want to go deeper. So when we work at the grassroots level, we work with, all of us. I mean, literally everybody. We don't exclude anybody from the work that we attempt to do. In this case, we were very much opposed to HB6, so we were working to stop it. In that arena.
Sure. Yeah. Could you just review some of the things you folks did last year? You were one of the most active organizations opposed to it. So, yeah. Could you just review some of the things you did last year?
Sure. And this HB6 sort of checked all the bad boxes for us. Because it would be bad for the environment, it would be bad for consumers, it was not transparent. Now we know, but we sort of suspected campaign finance, issues, or just straight out, bribery. So it kind of hits all the things we, like you said earlier, democracy. I mean, really, just the whole foundation of this is democracy. So what we did last year was a lot of the same things we've normally done, but then we sort of ramped it up in ways that we'd been hoping and planning to do, and this just gave us the perfect opportunity. One of them was that we kicked off a campaign with our 501c3 organization, which is Ohio Citizen Action Education Fund, called the Ohio Consumers Power Alliance. And what we specifically wanted to do was to highlight that these issues are just terrible for all consumers, no matter if you consider yourself, a Democrat, a Republican, an environmentalist or not. It's one of the things, these energy issues and the fact that we don't have any kind of comprehensive energy policy in the state, and it's just been a grab bag for years, has been hurting everybody. And nearly all of us pay an electric bill, and that is something that we have found to be an opportunity to speak with folks about an issue like HB6, because quite frankly, no matter how much money somebody has, nobody wants to pay more for the same service. Not improving service, not getting better, or the kind of generation you want, for instance. If you're just getting the same thing you've always gotten, nobody wants to pay more for that just to line, a company like First Energy's pockets. So we really focused on that. We did all kinds of things like, the usual things, like you'd mentioned before, testifying, and many, many, many public hearings this time, especially in the House. We certainly knocked on doors, thousands and thousands of doors all over the state, especially in some of the, I would say, oftentimes more forgotten House and Senate districts, just telling people what's going on, asking them to get a hold of their elected officials. And then we did, fun things also to help draw some attention, but serious as well. Like we did something called the Pulled Pork Tour, which was a large inflatable pig that we borrowed from some friends in Pennsylvania, and who fought bailouts themselves. And we were able to take that to a few cities across the state just over a year ago, including one at the last stop was at the Senate president's hometown, if you will. So we did all kinds of things to gain attention. We even did something that we don't normally get a chance to do, but we were able to raise money to do, which is a lot of media. And for us, that is, as a grassroots group, we don't have a lot of funding to do those kinds of, now we didn't do big TV, advertisements, but we did some radio. People probably heard some radio. We did some radio accountability after the fact, reminding people, because everybody in the House in Ohio is up for election this November, and half of the Senate. People should know how they voted on these issues. So we did all kinds of things like that. But what we also were able to do was send out some mailers and do some digital advertising, boosting things, Facebook and whatnot, which is a whole new realm and arena, but you do reach, additional audience. So we did everything we could to let people know what we knew, what we were finding out, and to get them involved.
Right. And so, of course, I would say that all those efforts and the efforts of the other organizations and were successful in that most of Ohio was opposed to this bill, and then, of course, they pushed it through anyway. But
Right.
then what did you think when you heard about the corruption charges against Larry Householder, that, in fact, he was yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, let me just preface this and remind people that this only passed by one vote last year. Even with all this money and now we know the corruption, the bribery, all the additional things money that was spent, they still only passed it by one vote, and that was Larry Householder's vote. So it's interesting to me, how desperate the opposition got, our opposition got, the people who were in favor of HB6. Well, I was actually on vacation when visiting family, just a very low-key, visiting my immediate family and nieces and nephews vacation in Nebraska, when I heard the charges. And I was a little surprised because I did not have any idea there was an investigation going on. When I learned more pretty quickly, it started to help fill in some of the gaps, if you will, because there was just, when we were fighting it, and you know this, you were part of this too, and you're right, there's so many great groups and individuals, and I mean, gosh, everybody, there were so many folks involved in this thing. Even, sort of strange bedfellows who maybe were on the same side, like us in oil and gas. We don't agree on anything probably, but we were on the same side of opposing this bill. So it's just kind of a crazy situation. But what we also see is that First Energy and First Energy Solutions, through this generation now, all of this corruption, and Larry Householder, they didn't have anything. They didn't have a vehicle at all for this when they introduced that Zen bill a couple of years before this, before Larry Householder. Until they had Speaker Householder in place to be able to do what they needed to do, that's when HB6 became HB6. And so it went from 0 to 60 in about 2 years' time, with roughly what started out as the same bill, at least an introduction. The HB6 grew into everything and the kitchen sink that they had been losing on for like 6 years. And my friend Neil Wagner at Sierra Club reminded me that just 6 years ago this week is when First Energy first filed their very first, at the Public Utilities Commission, bailout of all of these coal plants. It didn't have the nuclear plants in the mix, I think. Or I can't remember, honestly, 6 years ago. But they've been pushing for the same things and then some for a long time. A lot longer than that. But just even in the same form and fashion for about six and a half years. And, if this was such a great idea, if all the things they wanted to do were such great ideas, it seems to me that the shareholders would be saying, we want to invest in that. If those nuclear plants, if they're coal plants, if, whatever they own, if it was so great, which it isn't, but if it was so great, the shareholders themselves would be just clamoring to invest. And that's not what we're seeing. What we see is First Energy Solutions, and others too. AEP and others, invested in HB6. But we see them just continually digging into the pockets of their own customers. I mean, what company in this country treats their customers the way that First Energy treats their customers? It's just appalling, frankly. And then HB6 spreads that love all over the state. That that customer love. So it just,
people who don't even get their power from,
don't get their power, have nothing to do it, right?
Are going to get charged, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly.
All right. Well, so now there's this flurry of bills to repeal HB6, and could you review some of them and give us an idea of where they are in the legislative process?
Well, honestly, there's so many of them that we wouldn't even have time to start going over them. What I will tell you is that people should watch them closely, because they will change. And ones that start out as a clean repeal, which is what we're advocating for, Ohio Citizen Action, and I think all of the coalition partners and folks we worked with against HB6 agree with this, that we need a clean repeal. We don't need a repeal and replace, and I'll say that in a minute why, but we do not need a repeal and replace. We need a clean repeal. So there's a lot of folks watching these bills because the trust is just gone, as you would imagine. This is only a year ago that this all went down. People remember it, let alone now what they found out about the the scheme and the racketeering and bribery. What we need is some sort of, even a little bit of restored faith in the legislature, and the only people that can do that are the legislators with a clean repeal. And when you get to the place of, well, gosh, Rachel, we don't have all these, other mechanisms regarding energy in the state. I would say if Governor DeWine really thinks that he's an all-of-the-above energy governor, which that's not how I look at it and how Ohio Citizen Action looks at it, but if he really believes that, then there should be conversations and not thrown together, but there should be conversations in the future about an actual comprehensive energy policy in this state. Because if you can't actually have the conversation, if it's always piecemeal and, every utility kind of grabbing what they can, which is what it's been for about 15 years now, not the whole time of this. I don't feel like it's the whole time of this deregulation 20 years, but at least the last 15, it's just a grab bag. And that doesn't work. So, even folks like Governor DeWine, who really aren't necessarily on the same side as Ohio Citizen Action on lots of these issues, should be really looking at this as an opportunity to start restoring faith in their own, their own constituents. There's a lot of elections in the state. Now, both parties have got to be a little nervous about. Both parties had people voting for this. This was not a down the party line, kind of a thing, and that doesn't surprise me, and I know it doesn't surprise you either. But I just want to make sure that folks know that this would not have gotten passed, and frankly, Householder would have become the speaker if it weren't for some of the Democrats too. So,
right, and ironically, some Republicans actually voted against it.
Yeah,
but,
and some Republicans, and we talked with their voters and their constituents, and they reached out, and I have to, I really do have to give credit for the people who voted against it, whatever sort of political stripe they come from, because that they heard a lot from the inside. We know they heard from the outside, from us and everybody else. Mm-hmm. But now we know that anybody. I think everybody had their arm twisted. That mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they took them up on the offer, but I think it was probably pretty tough for everybody. Now that we hear all the things we hear, and yet some people still voted against it. Like you said, some Democrats and some Republicans, both ways.
Now, one thing I want to add is that I'm having a hard time getting my trust restored in this process, because I have been trying to call all the legislators that have introduced these bills. I've left numerous messages, I've sent emails, and so far there's been no response from any of them in terms of what they're doing or what's going on. And the whole idea, the whole thing that all these major decisions were made behind the closed doors, away from public view, that's what led to this horrible bill in the first place. And I'm having a hard time getting my faith restored. But what do you say?
I understand. I want to just say that one small step is what I'm hoping that they can do. But I agree with you. It's going to take a long time. They just have to start taking even a step.
Yeah. So what do you say to those? I know that some of the quote-unquote repeals still want to pay off Energy Harbor, still want to keep the charges and give that company their money. Right. What do you say to those proposals?
That is such a bad idea. Here's the thing. That bill was such a pack of lies. It was in the law. You can't. Nobody can tell me that they can actually suss out any part of it that might not be tainted. Any of the facts, quote unquote facts they've got in there, costs and jobs and all this. It's like, I don't believe, I know that there are jobs saved or lost based upon this, but I don't believe the numbers, because I don't believe that First Energy or Energy Harbor, First Energy Solutions, Harbors, whatever they're called now, all of the things that they said, to get that bill over the finish line finally were so desperate that I think that you can't, it needs to be done, completely done, and then we need to figure out from there what might be able to happen, because the fact of the matter is, like you said, they picked winners and losers, and even some solar is in, but wind wasn't, but a lot of solar wasn't. It's just a mess. It's the best way to say it.
The solar that is in there is kind of the corrupt exceptions that prove the corrupt rule, if you know what I mean. They
Well, there's
carved
always
out a few
right,
solar projects
Yeah.
and said, okay, those couple of solar projects, they'll get some of this money too. But those
Yeah.
were picked completely based on political influence, and
Exactly.
it wasn't a statewide policy. Oh yes, we support solar. It's that. Oh well, this bill's going to hurt this constituency in this town that we need. So, okay, we'll let them have some of the money. But
Exactly.
it
It was just more
it was
politics.
terrible.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, Rachel, thanks so much for interviewing us, and thanks for staying on top of this complex situation down there in Columbus. If people want more information about you and your organization, where should they look?
I would suggest two places, and both will have lots of information. Of course, we have social media with all these things too, Twitter and whatnot. But OhioCitizen.org is Ohio Citizen Action's website, and Ohio Consumers Power Alliance also has a website. Both our websites and our social media are keeping up to date on this. So please, as much as possible, continue watching and weighing in.
Right, and I think that's important, is that you can't look away. I mean,
No.
I was on a trip with my family once. We went to Europe, and we packed way too much stuff, and we were sitting at this train station surrounded by this island of baggage, and there was this guy. I noticed this guy who noticed us and our packages, and I'm 99% sure that he was like a professional thief, because he was waiting for me to look away, and I could just tell he was going to dart in and grab something and run off, and and that actually got confirmed because he followed us onto the train and then tried to avoid the conductor as he was coming around taking tickets, but I never took my eyes off him, and he never got something. So we can't take our eyes off these people in Columbus. They're going to try to steal that money from us by keeping House Bill 6 and keeping the charges. But if you do keep your eye on a thief, lots of times they won't get away with it. So thank you, Rachel, for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. That was Rachel Belz, just one of the many, many people and organizations that were fighting HB6 all last year, and now have some hope for some justice. And let's hope justice does prevail in this case. Okay, now it's time to hear from our wonderful sponsors. And For a Green Future is brought to you by Wood County Parks. The Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's a bunch of ways you can get a hold of them or see what they're up to. One is if you want to just call them, they're at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You can also go to their website, which is wcparks.org, and they have a Facebook page, the Wood County Parks. And finally, they've got this cool app. You just go to the App Store and download the WC Parks, and that is a free app. Then it will tell you what's going on at the parks, and also you can post nice pictures of things that you might find or do at the Wood County Parks. So, Wood County Park System, and we're very grateful to have them as a sponsor. We are also extremely grateful to our patrons, and these are people who've gone to patreon.com, searched for a Green Future, and there's a bunch of different membership levels that'll pop up there. You could just sign up to give a monthly donation and keep us on the air. And you can donate at whatever level you can afford. Some people that's $1 a month. That's great. Some people it's $25, or some people even $50. Those rare few. But we're grateful for every single one of them, and we couldn't be bringing you the show without their support. If you want to support, you go to patreon.com and look for a Green Future. Okay, well, we're hoping and expecting Rebecca to call in soon, our co-host, erstwhile co-host. In the meantime, it's time to start talking about a little bit of environmental news. And one thing here is the Milne Ice Shelf in Canada has collapsed. And the planet's ice caps, they wax and wane with the seasons. They get bigger and smaller. But the very northernmost part of our continent of North America is covered, or should be covered, by permanent ice. It's just part of what our planet has had for the last 10,000 years or so. Now, unfortunately, this Milne Ice Shelf collapsing, this signals a potentially very, very dangerous increase in the positive feedback loop of global warming. We've talked about that before. But this is part of the planet that has always been white because it's always been covered in snow, which means it's always been very reflective of solar energy. And so having these ice caps at the pole is part of what keeps the rest of the planet habitable. It's part of what keeps the rest of the planet within temperature ranges that we can survive. And so to have a permanent ice shelf like this collapse and melt is a big deal. And in fact, this chunk that broke off was 30 square miles of ice just in over 2 days, just lots of rumbling and cracking. And the scientific expedition that was up there that recorded this actually lost their camp. It got swallowed up by the collapsing ice. But what has been happening this summer up there in the very northernmost tip of Canada is that the temperatures have been more than 9 degrees above average. And this is right in line with all the predictions that have been made by the simulations from the beginning, 40 years ago, back in the 80s and 90s. We were 30 years ago. They were talking about this and predicting this, and this is what's happening. The one thing about it, though, is it is happening faster than all those predictions, because all those scientists were afraid of being called alarmists, and they didn't want to make what they thought at the time to be outlandish claims that huge ice shelves like this could be collapsing in just a few years. So they were predicting low, which is something that we environmentalists were always saying, yeah, there was uncertainty in the models. The uncertainty could be in the low direction. But of course, the oil companies and the people that they've hired and convinced of the untruth were seizing on that uncertainty to say, oh, well, no, it's got to be up at the best possible prediction. And no, it's looking more and more like it was the worst possible predictions are actually the accurate ones. So this is, I got this information off Yale Environment 360, which is a nice website with a lot of environmental news. And I don't know who the Milne Ice Shelf is named after. I wonder if it's A.A. Milne, the guy who wrote the Winnie the Pooh books. But I know that Pooh would be extremely disappointed in the fact that we're letting this global warming race out of control like this. Pooh Bear would have been like, well, just stop putting carbon in the air. What's the problem? So that is a big story that you may or may not have gotten from the mainstream media. One story you did probably get from the mainstream media, our next story, is that Hurricane Isaias, of course, hit the East Coast and caused tons of damage. And actually, I had originally hoped to have a different guest this weekend. I had hoped to have Heidi Huttner, who's been our guest before. She's a great environmentalist and ecologist. But she wasn't able to come on this week because her power is still out. She actually lives in a very affluent suburb of New York City. But Hurricane Isaias came and took out all the power. And she just literally physically could not come on the show because her phone battery charging wouldn't necessarily last long enough. It was then she's trying to deal with a house with no electricity for going on a week now. And when I say at the start of every show that we talk about how ecology is going to affect you and your wealth and your health and your happiness, Heidi's not very happy. Her house is a mess, and she can't fix it up because there's no electricity. And these things are predicted in the models to happen more and more often and be more and more severe, these hurricanes and these storms. And in fact, second story sort of bleeding into the third story, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA as it's called, has made its prediction for the 2020 hurricane season, and what they're predicting is that there are going to be 25 named storms between August 1st and October. And this is the most named storms that NOAA has ever predicted. In other words, they're predicting the worst hurricane season ever. In fact, 25 named storms. Every year they come up with all the weird names for hurricanes, alternating the male and the female, the gender names. They only come up with 21 names a year. And this year it looks like there are going to be 25 named storms. And that, just a little trivia, so then they start in with Greek letters. So after they get through the Z's, they're going to start going alpha, beta, and gamma. And every one of these hurricanes, every one of these named storms is a potential disaster, not just for the people who live on the coast, but they're a potential disaster for us here in, we think we're protected. We're in the middle of the continent. We've got a whole continent around us. And this year, for example, we've had a really good growing year. It looked kind of iffy at the start, but there's been enough rain and enough sun, and the corn is good, and the soybeans are growing nicely. But that can all be wiped out in a weekend by the remains of a hurricane that managed to make it up here and flood everything. And so this is not some over there problem. Global warming by definition is global, and everybody on the globe is affected by it, and everybody on the globe should be doing what they can to stop it, which means, don't buy the huge pickup truck that gets 8 miles per gallon. Think about getting yourself a hybrid, plug-in hybrid like I've got. Oh, and a personal note on that, I meant to mention this at the start of the show. The system I told you last week got hooked up and was producing power. This past week, it got fully connected. The app is working on my phone. I can literally watch as all the solar power comes in, and the car charger is hooked up and functioning now, so I can literally charge my car off my solar panels, and we can, so we can push our van, our great big comfortable van, up to 100 miles per gallon now, and fast charging off my solar panels in only 2 hours. We can do this, folks, and once we do it, it'll be great. But the thing is, you do have to do it. I mean, you personally, when you make that decision, you have to choose the carbon neutral or the carbon free, or at least the much less carbon intensive choice. And it's the government is failing us. I mean, we saw with House Bill 6, democracy is being undermined, and so the government isn't making the needed changes. We've got to do what we can, and there's no excuse for not doing it. And so, now's the time. So what did you think? 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065 with any sort of environmental question. And now we have our co-host, Rebecca Wood. Are you there?
Hello. I'm here.
Hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what did you think of what Rachel had to say?
I like her. I find her factual, no crap chipperness comforting somehow.
Yeah.
So,
I would agree
bad,
with
but we're
that.
doing everything we can do. We have a plan.
Yeah, she's a very straightforward person. Yeah, and as you say, no nonsense. Just here's what needs to be done. Let's do it.
There you go.
That's to be admired. So, you were saying, Rebecca, that you could talk a little bit about there's a nice park that you're aware of that you wanted to share with the folks.
Yeah, it's my birth month, so I just am doing random places that I thought Becca thinks are cool now. But yeah, one of my favorite places when I had a friend who was going to Laramie State was something called Vedauwoo State Park, which apparently is it's part of Medicine Bow National Park and
what state
or
is
National
this
Forest. Sorry, what?
What state is this in?
Southeast Wyoming, right between Laramie and Cheyenne on Interstate 80 there. But yeah,
Okay.
the centerpiece of it is like a 500-foot rocky outcropping of something called the Sherman Granite, apparently, which is the source of the best something called off-width crack climbing. Some of the best rock climbing in Wyoming, maybe the country, they say. Which makes sense because when we went out there, a lot of if you go to Wyoming State as a graduate student or as an undergrad, if you're not from Wyoming, there's two reasons. Either you couldn't get in some other places, and or you really love rock climbing and or mountain biking. There were a lot of guys in the Masters of Fine Arts Creative Writing program who like to go out and rock climb because that's how they end up at Wyoming State and Laramie.
Uh-huh.
We saw that. We went out there once during the day and saw the rock climbers, and it just looked terrifying and like a horrible idea because like it's sort of, I don't know how to describe this. It's like this row of columns with other sort of smaller rocks on the top of many of them that look sort of like heads, which I guess is why Vedauwoo, I guess in the Arapaho language means earthborn or land of earthborn spirits or something like that, because it kind of looks like a bunch of guys standing there. It looks like people with heads. And I guess what it was is that those columns are sort of magma columns from old volcanoes, and everything else wore away, and then the columns are still there. Kind of looks like a cliff with no high ground around it, you know? But, yeah, they're like 500 feet high. You can see 75 miles to the south from the top, apparently. I wouldn't know. I'm not ever doing anything like that, but it was cool just to walk around the base. It really was.
You didn't attempt it yourself then, I guess.
Oh, hell no. No, there were like some smaller boulders, like the size of a person, like 5 or 6 feet that I climbed up on.
Okay, well, that's something. That's a start.
Yes.
So it sounds like the students at that college must be extraordinarily buff then, I would guess.
They are. They were sort of hardy, wiry little folk, a lot of the people there. There's a whole different breed from the graduate students that my academic parents were friends with, who were, sort of bumbling liberal arts major types. These people didn't trip over their own shoelaces anywhere near as much.
Huh. Well, that's cool. So somebody could just hop on I-80, and just head straight over there if they wanted.
There you go. Well, I made the trip a couple of times during those 2 years, and you go through Ohio, Indiana, I think, Iowa, Nebraska, and then I think you get to Wyoming. I think that's roughly it. You cross the Mississippi River. What is the little town that has a casino in it? Never mind, I don't know. But it's the name of that another horrible general who did bad things who actually did bad things at Sand Creek Massacre Trail. That's right there too, like between Cheyenne and Laramie.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
I think it's mostly some off-road trails, I don't know, mountain biking, off-road vehicles, what have you.
Well, it sounds cool. I guess I'll add that to the list of places I want to go someday. So
we went out like once at night too, just to see the stars, and you would not believe how many stars there are, Joe. I had no idea.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of stars.
Yeah. There's nothing like being in a really dark sky. The island that we go to in the summer, in Upper Lake Michigan, had super dark skies for many, many years. There's starting to be more light pollution up there, but it's just just amazing. All right.
It was exponentially more than the stars that you see in Ohio or any other place, it seemed.
Yeah, I know. We're down to the point where, you can count the number of stars on your hands and toes around here anyway. So unless, there are still some spots out in the country and you can find them, but it's getting, light pollution is getting pretty serious. It's just something we need to, if you can get out to someplace with dark sky, especially if you have a child, who's never been, because we're to the point now where you're going to have to make a special plan and a special trip to let your kid know about things like the Milky Way, because they can't just go out at their backyard and see it anymore because there's so much light pollution these days. So make that trip and maybe head out to Wyoming for it. So, all right. Although to be fair, you can find it on a lot of the just a bit further west, west of Illinois. You can pull off on most side roads when it's very sparsely populated, and you can get a good taste of that really deep.
Okay, but in Laramie, the thing is, in Laramie, Joe, you can also get like a $5 used cowboy boots in any size, any color of the rainbow. You can get like a whole collection for $25. And also, you can, if you live in a major city like New York or Los Angeles, you can probably, just bump around the thrift shops there and be the only person in your city to have a diorama featuring a jackalope in your living room. I saw one of these in the thrift store. I was like, I want that.
All kinds of opportunities to go west. Yeah, okay.
Totally.
All right. Well, and now I think we're ready for the letter from the future, Rebecca. All right,
okay.
Here we go. Dear GGG, well, I'm back at work and haven't really been able to unpack yet. The first thing I did, of course, after getting off the train was go and see Michael. When he saw me, he let out a shout and came hobbling across the room to hug me as hard as he could. I started to cry a little because he only had the strength of a small child. Michael received a much higher dose of radiation than I did. Almost all his major organs had to be replaced with cloned backups. But even in your future, we can't transplant a brain. He has some brain damage and trouble talking. There's no way to know yet if that will be permanent. Of course, I knew all this already. I've been talking with him via hologram every day. But as long as it was by hologram, somehow it didn't seem real. It was kind of like a show where Michael was just pretending. But now that I've hugged him and kissed him again, I know it's real. The old Michael is gone. The new Michael isn't finished healing yet. Will I be able to love him as much as I did the old Michael? One thing I wanted to tell you about the trip back, GGG. As our solar-powered dirigible was flying over the Atlantic, the pilot swooped down low because there was a pod of blue whales. It was a group of about a dozen swimming together, mothers with their babies. How could you have let them nearly go extinct? Once you knew petroleum-based plastic was killing them, why didn't you outlaw plastics immediately? Why did you take so long to push us so close to the edge on so many things? I know you tried, GGG, and ultimately were successful, but couldn't you have gone faster? Oh well, I guess it's time for me to learn patience. Patience with Michael, patience with the people of your time who seem so clueless to us. I'm learning, but it's hard. Love, Marie I. So, another nice letter from my great-great-granddaughter. And I have a question for the listeners, and please, we've got time for a call, so call in at 866-240-1065. I did get feedback from one listener, just one, who said that basically when I start the letter from the future, that's when he turns off the show. That he loves the program up to that point, but he can't stand the letter from the future. And I want to know, is that like a widespread feeling? Really could use some feedback here. Let us know. And, of course, if you don't want to call in on the air, you can send us email at joe@DeMare for a Green Future. DeMare spelled DEMARE, and for is spelled out, FOR. So it's joe@DeMare for a Green Future.org. And, send me an email. You can get in touch with us on our Facebook pages. We have both a page and a group. And I'm not exactly sure what the difference is supposed to be, so they're pretty much exactly the same in terms of content. But, yeah, let me know. What do you think of the letter from the future? Do you like it? Do you want me to keep doing it? Give us some feedback. What do you think? Rebecca?
Some people just don't like fiction in any form. It doesn't really matter if it's good or bad fiction or any of that stuff. They're nonfiction people.
That's true. Yeah, there are such people.
It's always gonna. Even if it is sort of factually consistent and plausible, they're like, no, that's made up, let's pretend lies. I don't like it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, if you don't have any fiction in your life, if you try to be absolutely 100% factual all the time, I'm afraid that could lead to craziness. That could lead to a mental breakdown. And in fact, I read a story once about a mathematician who trained himself not to have any imagination. He never went off on any kind of fantasy, and he was doing fine till he hit his mid-20s when an elf came up to him in the garden and said, we're glad you've done this because now you can see us even though no one else can. And his life kind of went downhill from there. So,
So that was great. You can see elves. That's how you see elves. I've been wanting to for a long time. I didn't think that was the way.
That was his way. I don't know if it would work for anybody else. Yeah. So keep dreaming, folks. Yeah, dream about the green future, and we'll make it happen. All right. Well, reached the end of the show. Thanks for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we're signing off.
Radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia.